Most authors spend years trying to crack the publishing code. J.D. Barker hacked it on his first attempt, then built a global brand around it. He's the New York Times best-selling mind behind the 4MK series, a suspense writer whose thrillers have earned him comparisons to Stephen King. But the thing that makes Barker genuinely dangerous in this industry isn't just his writing, it's how he thinks about it. As he prepares for the international launch of his book, The First Scarlet Door, he is here today to discuss international sales and how to actually turn a writing career into a business. If you've ever wondered how the top authors operate, this is that conversation. JD, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I know that you're very busy with the book launch and writing and life and everything that you're going on.
As we record, it's July 3rd. It's very hot here, and I'm getting ready to go join my wife and family over at the water park. So,
I'm in North Carolina, so it's really hot here. I think the feel like today's 106.
It's crazy. It's like everybody I talk to all around the world these last couple of days, it's been 3 digits.
It is. We moved from Florida to North Carolina, so well, we're maybe more used to it than somebody else. It's still not fun.
I grew up in South Florida, so I get it. I love New England. I looked at the forecast app, and I think every other day other than like tomorrow is like 60s and 70s for our highs, which is that's a sweet spot for me because you can hang out outside and not sweat.
Sure.
Florida, you can't walk to your mailbox without getting drenched in sweat.
No. The thing that makes it survivable here is the breeze. There's always a breeze.
Yeah, the Carolinas are beautiful.
Really cool. They are. I love it. I'm on the eastern side. That's where I'm from. So I came back. So you will be doing a simultaneous international release in over 150 countries. This is not your first international release, so you're an old hat at this. But how do you even wrap your head around the logistics of coordinating something this massive? Where does your active participation begin and end?
I mean, at this point, I've got a lot of people that help me out, so it's not like a one-man show anymore. It kind of started off that way. I'm in a very weird, unique situation. I've got my own imprint at Simon & Schuster. So from the domestic standpoint, I can publish what I want whenever I want. When I wrote these 3 prequels, I didn't tell anybody I was writing them. I just kind of did it in secret because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull it off. It's a pretty complicated set of books. But when I finished them, I told my agent what I did. I told her that I wanted to release all 3 books on the same day on a worldwide basis. Because years back, Stephen King released 2 books on the same day. Desperation, I forget what the other one is. But I think he's the only author who's ever done that, like multiple hardcovers on the same day. So I'm like, he did 2, I'm going to do 3. And I could do that, domestically because of the Simon & Schuster thing. But when we started talking to the foreign publishers, we immediately got pushback. None of them were able to really keep up with a schedule like that. And, there's a lot of moving parts in that. I mean, they've got to take the book, they've got to edit it, they've got to translate it, then they've got to record their audiobook. So there's a lot of things they've got to do. So ultimately, we basically told everybody, these are the dates the 3 books are coming out. Try to keep up. Whether or not everybody is able to, I guess we'll see. Because the books they're based on an existing trilogy that already has a big following, and there's a lot of twists, a lot of turns and stuff going on, a lot of information is most likely going to sneak out into the public as soon as these books come out. People start reviewing them, they start talking about them online. So like the things that we're trying to keep secret, it's really hard to keep that secret. And the foreign publishers know that. So if it's released in 2/3 of the world on one day and they're 6 months behind, they know that's going to hurt their sales. So everybody's trying to hit the dates that we set.
Well, that has to be complicated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on to make all that happen, but it grew intrinsically, like over years. I've been a full-time author now for 11 years, publishing under my own name. And, each book just kind of releases just a bigger audience than the last one. It just grows a little bit with each one. So it's not like this happened overnight. I've had friends where that's happened. They write that book that just completely hits it out of the park, and all of a sudden they got to follow it up. And the production schedule behind that is nuts. Dan Brown lives down the street from me, and like watching him release Secret of Secrets a few months back, like I was in awe because that book, I think it had been 7 years since his last title. He kept that book under wraps. He didn't share it with anybody. He didn't give out any copies to the press. There were no advanced copies floating around anywhere. Everybody basically got it on publication date. And pulling off something like that is amazing.
Yeah, that's hard to keep under your hat. Especially today with all the, the way things are so easily communicated. It's got to be difficult.
Well, Taylor Swift is going through it right now. She's trying to get married in New York, and I think I just saw about 6 or 7 different news stories about this wedding that, she hasn't actually confirmed is happening.
Right. It has become its own monster.
Yeah.
I have not read this series. I did read Dracul, because I love vampires, like they're my thing. And Dracula is in my top 5 favorite books of all time. So naturally, I was drawn to that, and I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to let you know that was a very good book.
That was a fun one to write. I mean, Dracula is one of those books that's been in my life, as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, we didn't have a TV, so I grew up just reading a lot. And I read like all the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews by the time I got into kindergarten, and then I just dove into the classics like Charles Dickens and Mark Twain. My mom owned an antique store, so we used to hit a lot of garage sales and estate sales. And I remember going to one with her one day on a Saturday, and this guy just had a box of books, and sitting up on top was a copy of Dracula. And it was like this really worn out paperback. It had been through the ringer. But I picked it up. It was 25 cents. I read the cover in the back, and I was like, there's no way she's going to let me buy this, because I was 8 years old and it sounded like very much like an adult book, like something I shouldn't be reading just yet. But she let me get it. I took it home. I read it, and then it scared the bejesus out of me. I think I slept with the lights on for the next 2 weeks. That's the first time I ever got like an emotional reaction out of a book, like a book just that frightened me to that level. And I've been chasing that feeling as a reader and writer ever since. So to be able to work on Dracula and use Bram Stoker's original notes and all that material that I had access to, that was crazy.
I can't even believe it. I mean, like, that is just like, for me, the best of the best times.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like what sold me on the project. Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I was going to ask you, is how that came about.
Yeah, my very first novel, it was called Forsaken. I was up for the best horror novel of the year, best debut horror novel through the Horror Writers Convention. And I went to the conference for the awards ceremony, and there was a signing that I had to do the day before. And I sat at a table next to Dacre Stoker, who is Bram's great-grandnephew. He started questioning me on my background. And I had worked as a book doctor and a ghostwriter, basically behind the scenes for about 20 years before I started publishing books on my own. And he was just picking my brain about it. I asked him every question I could think of related to Bram Stoker, because when was I going to get that opportunity again? And I kind of thought that's all that was, just the two of us hanging out for an hour signing books for people. But the next day he pulled me aside and he said, listen, I have to confess, when we sat down, I knew who you were. I knew about your history, and my family and I, we've been trying to find somebody to write a prequel to Dracula for a very long time using Bram's original notes. And because of your experience as a ghostwriter, we feel you might be the guy to do it. And they asked if I would be interested. That's not something you say no to. But what he really told me, what really, clinked it for me is, like, I've read Dracula a million times, and it starts with Jonathan Harker on the train. Like, that's the way the book starts. But he told me that was actually page 103 of the original manuscript. So the original first 100 pages of the book were very autobiographical, and Bram basically explained to the world why vampires were real. Like, he tried to sell Dracula as a true story.
Right.
Like, he turned it into his editor, and his editor pushed it back across the desk and said, there's no way we can do this, because at the time Jack the Ripper was active in London. People believed in the paranormal and the supernatural. They were just worried about what would happen if they put that out there. So they made Bram strip the first 100 pages out of the book, and he didn't want to, but he needed the money. So the book basically started there. But he firmly believed that vampires were real. We found notes where he had started researching him as young as 16 years old. And he didn't start writing Dracula until he was 43. So it was a lifelong obsession for him. And when he died, he had his body cremated because he was worried about what would happen to his soul. He didn't want his body left behind. So he was all in on that. When I started going through his notes and seeing some of the things that he had written, like, he had researched vampire lore in every corner of the world. He found legends for it, which was really fascinating because, all these societies had legends about vampires long before we all started going on ships and sailing around the world and talking to each other. I think a lot of people believe, even something as crazy as vampires, it's seated in truth somewhere. There's some kind of basis to it. And that's kind of what he focused on. He found the true lore all around the world, and he found all these things that were, almost identical in the way vampires were described, but in places that couldn't possibly have spoken to each other, which was just amazing. So we incorporated all of that into that book when we wrote it. My favorite part, honestly, is the author's note at the end, because you read this whole book, it's this crazy story, and when you read the author's note, we tell you what parts are true and which parts are fiction. And the craziest parts in that story are actually the true parts.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think it's a Gilgamesh. It was the first instance of a mention of vampires. And maybe that's werewolves, so I take that back. That's werewolves. But there are vampires in the Asian countries. The Vikings called them the Dragors, I think. When I tell you I'm into vampires, I'm into vampires. I have all kinds of books on the history and the lore of it. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, and
I don't
Bram
know
was Bram was
believe
too.
in it, but I wouldn't say that they're impossible. It's kind of like aliens. I kind of feel the same way.
I'm smart enough to understand there's a lot I don't understand, so I just try to keep a very open mind to it.
Right. There you go. Exactly. Authors, a lot of times, they want to build their business to take advantage of that global reach. But could you tell me one thing that you learned during the process that you wish you knew then that you know now?
Honestly, the one thing that took me by surprise, a lot of my books have humor in the books, but it's very subtle humor. When you're writing about serial killers and you get in the heads of the police that chase those people, in real life, they've got a very dark sense of humor. And it's a coping mechanism. If they see some horrific things and they use humor as a way to balance that out. And I spoke to a lot of cops long before I wrote these books, and I heard that, like when you hang out with them, it starts to seep into the conversations. And the ones that had that dark humor were the guys that stuck around for 10, 20 years and had a career in homicide. And the ones who didn't have it, they were gone in like a year or two. They couldn't deal. So I tried to incorporate as much of that as I could into the books. In English, it works great. But I started getting all these phone calls from the translators in foreign countries because translating humor is hard. It could be a play on words. It could be a scenario that we know about in the US that they may not know about in France or some other part of the world. So the humor parts of the book are, really slowed things down from a translation standpoint. I've tried to be very careful of that as I write in today's world because I'm in, I think, about 23 or 24 different languages.
But well, how do you kind of do that? Did you just make sure the humor is more culturally easy to understand?
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm thinking that you might be losing something, but that makes it more challenging for you. So
yeah, you definitely lose, because I'll come up with some ideas for a joke or something I want to put in there, and I'm like, there's no way that's going to play outside of the US, so I'll leave it out. But like we were talking about Taylor Swift, like that's a global thing. So if I want to make a joke about the Taylor Swift wedding in New York at some point in a book, that's something that they know about in Bulgaria. They know about it in Russia. They're hearing about it in France. So I try to focus on things that are globally known rather than something specific to a particular area. I've had a bunch of books that have been optioned. So the folks in Hollywood are trying to make films and TV shows and stuff out of them. I never thought about that when I first started writing the book, but I've had so many conversations now with producers and directors. When I write a scene, I start thinking about, well, what's it going to cost to film this? Like, where are they going to film it? Can it be filmed? Like, these are thoughts that never crept into my mind at the beginning.
you would have so many ways that you would have to really pay attention to make sure you have a really good marketable product.
Yeah, when you hit all of those, then it works well on a worldwide basis. That's gold.
And obviously, you're doing that. So you write for several outlets like Rolling Stones and Forbes, and that's on top of your book writing. How do you carve out enough a space in your mind, in your life, for actual writing when you're dealing with your business logistics, especially now faced with such a large-scale launch?
I think it only gets scary and feels large scale when you take a step back and you look at like the whole picture. But I tend to break everything down and I look at it like on a day-to-day basis. So I've been writing full time now for I think about 11 years. I start the day with whatever book I'm currently working on. I step into my office, I grab my coffee, I close the door, and I turn off the internet. I don't let the outside world come in at all until I get my daily word count. And I do about 2,000 to 3,000 words a day. So I'm usually done with that around 10:30, 11, and then I flip the switch on the internet and my inbox fills in with all the other things that are going on, all the other, projects that are happening, agents that I've got to talk to, conversations, stuff like that. So the words are the bread and butter, so I've got to get that done every day. I, do it like on a fairly rigid schedule. I'm able to kind of balance everything. A Rolling Stone article or something like that. They've been very kind. They kind of let me write about what I want whenever I want. So I've got a bunch of notes on my phone. If an idea strikes me, I'll write it up really quick and I send it in. I might go a couple weeks or a couple months without submitting anything at all. It's not an income driver for me. I do it from a branding standpoint. As an author, it's important to get your name out there, regardless of how you do it. I tend to think of myself as a brand. I try to get my name as visible in as many places as I possibly can.
That's very good advice for anyone to not just think about their writing business as a business, but a brand. When you start with that, then it follows through in everything that you do, whether it's building your website or going to a conference or going to a book reading or doing a podcast, everything that you do. And that is a really good mindset to have because it helps to keep everything cohesive together. And that's what people recognize.
Years ago, before I started writing full time, my last real job, I was a chief compliance officer at a brokerage firm. They did a lot of investment banking. So I saw a lot of ideas basically go from some scribbling on a napkin at a bar to a public company like 2 or 3 years later. And I saw everything that happened in between for literally every type of company you could possibly think of, from pet food to healthcare. But like there was always a common denominator there, and it was brand. It didn't matter what you were trying to sell. The widget really wasn't important, but the brand itself was, and getting it out there, getting that name recognition, building trust, all those types of things. So I really took that to heart. And when I started writing books, I looked at the author career and what I wanted to do from that standpoint, not so much as, just writing a book, but selling a product. And how did I plan to do that? How did I plan to get it in front of as many people as possible? I remember walking into a Barnes and Noble at the very beginning and just looking around and just studying the various book covers. I saw a lot of the same names all the time. It was funny because you'd see a Stephen King book off on the side. His name is huge on the cover. The title is small. Nora Roberts, James Patterson, they're all kind of the same thing because they're selling the brand. They're not selling the individual book. So I've been conscious of that from the get-go.
How old were you when you published your first book?
I was 43 when I published the first book under my own name. But I had been working behind the scenes for, I think it was 23 years altogether. I had been told at a very early age, writing is a fantastic hobby, but you can't make a living at it. So I had to get a real job. So that's how I ended up in finance. But I would come home at night and I would work on books. I fell into this little side hustle as a book doctor. I worked with agents. I worked with editors. I worked with other authors. They would send me books that were half baked or had some type of issue, and I would, rewrite them, or I would fix whatever that problem was. And I did that for so long. I think I just got a really good handle on what the folks in New York really wanted out of a bestseller, because I could hear those voices all the time in the back of my head as I was editing and when I started writing on my own. I did that for long enough where I've often wondered what would have happened if I started publishing books under my own name back in my 20s. I honestly don't think the books would have hit as well as they're hitting now because I didn't have that experience behind me that I have today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The reason I asked that question is, with you being such a prolific reader at 8, it just seems like a natural journey for you to end up in some type of writing field. So now you explained all that. Now I understand. Yeah. Because obviously you had a love for the language and the written word and the art very early.
Yeah, and it was a training period too. I've never had any formal training as an author. I've never taken any real classes outside of like high school English and things like that. But I've read so many books that the structure of a story is just ingrained in my head. So when I write a story, I know that a twist needs to happen here, the climax needs to start here, this needs to happen there. And if I miss those particular benchmarks, it almost feels like I'm on a road trip and I missed a turn. I feel like I'm going off in the wrong direction and I've got to throw the car in reverse and kind of back up to wherever I made the mistake and fix it. Like you could take any one of my books and drop them into a 3-act structure, but I never think of them that way when I'm writing them. They happen to come out that way. And it's just because I've read so much. That formula it's a framework that it's in my subconscious at this point.
I know you work on a lot of collaborative projects, and that probably you gained that experience through ghostwriting. I believe collaboration is like the key to life.
I enjoy it. The book doctor stuff, all those things, I was always working with other people. So it honestly felt weird when I sat down to write a book on my own. One of the things I think that really helped me learn how to create characters, I wrote a ton of memoirs for other people. So I work with sports figures, I work with politicians, with actors, with actresses. I'd have to sit down with these people and I would interview them sometimes for a couple days at a time. They would tell me the stories that they wanted to put in the book. Then I'd try to get them to talk about the things they don't want to talk about, because that's the parts everybody really wants in a book. Once I got all that material, I'd have to go back to my house and listen to these recordings, and I'd have to write a book from that person's point of view in first person, basically in their voice. When you do that enough, it makes character development that much easier. I always encourage authors to read memoir, because it's the only chance you're really going to get a legitimate firsthand account from somebody. And I think, if you read enough of those, I think just like with the story structure thing, I think it just gets ingrained in your head and you learn to reproduce it.
I see where you're going with that for sure. So with all the things that you have going on, do you have any productivity hack or a philosophy you lean on that helps you kind of stay on track?
No, I wish there was. Honestly, I'm autistic. I've got a form of autism called Asperger syndrome. And I think that's helped me over the years when it comes to this type of thing. I'm very good at just creating a structure in my life. When it comes to projects, I organize everything to the best of my ability. I don't procrastinate at all. If I've got something hanging over my head that has to be done, I'd rather knock it out and get it finished. So I think all those things are driving factors in what I do.
Funny where we find our superpowers. I have severe ADHD. And for me, so much of it is a superpower. It's not a negative in my life.
Yeah, that's how that works. I was 22 when I was diagnosed, like officially, and I'm 55 now. I've spent the last 30 years basically trying to double down on the things that work really well for me and trying to mitigate the ones that don't. But once you find those couple of things, we're all, I think, on the spectrum or different in some way or another. And I think if you find, whatever your little pieces, whatever you're good at, you can hone that skill.
I absolutely agree with you. So, what are you working? Does it have anything to do with this series?
I can't tell you what I'm doing with regard to this series. It just got optioned for the 4th time by Sylvester Stallone, of all people, Balboa Productions. Yeah, so they're working on a TV series and they optioned all the books. I kind of have to be careful as far as what's not released and what's coming out. I'm in the middle of a book right now with James Patterson. We've been writing together for a while. I think this is book 6 or 7 that we've done. And I still work with a lot of co-authors on my own. I'm having a lot of fun with that. I love working with other people. To me, it feels more normal than writing a book just all by myself. When you bring 2 heads together, you tend to come up with a product neither of you could create on your own. To give you an example, I had a book a few years ago called Heavy Are the Stones that I wrote with a woman named Christine Daigle. In real life, she's a neuropsychologist, so she was able to bring that skill set to the writing room. I can fake my way through it. I can do a bunch of Google searches and watch some Netflix specials and things like that and come up with something that's believable. But when you've got that authentic voice in the writing room, you can't beat that. So I'm always seeking out people that have something that I don't have, that I can bring into the mix and to kind of create something unique.
Books with 2 or more authors. I'm talking about fiction, of course. A lot of times one person will do all the female characters, another will do the male characters. I just love to see how they work together and the mechanics of it and how still come up with this cohesive story.
Yeah, I've worked on more of them than I can count, and I don't think any 2 of them have come together the same way. It's really important when you sit down with a co-author just to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of each person and kind of double down on that. It's almost like having 2 people in the kitchen cooking breakfast at the same time. If you both try to make eggs, you're going to have a problem. But if one person's making bacon while the other person's making eggs, then everything works out.
Right, right. I don't want to hold you up anymore. I know you have a busy day planned. Tomorrow's the 4th of July, and today you're spending it with your families. I sincerely appreciate you coming on and talking to me. I look forward to this series. As a matter of fact, I have it in my TBRs.
Well, I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Oh, no problem. Well, you have a wonderful 4th of July, and thank you so much.
All right, you too. Take care.